Yo.
Hey.
Yeah, hey, my friend was on yesterday. He was asking you about Donatism. And we had talked a little bit about that afterward.
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. And he wanted me to come on and talk with you. So, here I am about as far as, like rebaptism within the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go all out and just say Orthodox or Donatists, right? Because I think a little of the nuance was lost there when he came on and was talking about that.
So let's just make this really clear. So if I go to Athanasius in his Festal Letters and he says that the Eucharist eaten outside of the church, the Orthodox Church or communion, is a dead meal and doesn't give you any grace, is that Donatism?
Not necessarily. So it all depends on, wouldn't it all depend on the validity of the apostolic succession and the holy orders of the priests who are consecrating that Eucharist?
Well, obviously they have holy orders if they have the attempt to have the divine liturgy outside the church.
Okay. So then it comes down to whether or not it's devoid of grace, right?
Well, what it comes down to is that you have a mistaken idea as to what Donatism is. And so this is because a lot of times that people hear about the Orthodox view, they think that it's Donatist because it tends to say that sacraments outside of the Orthodox Church are graceless. That's not Donatism. Donatism precisely is the efficacy of the sacraments depends on the worthiness of the minister. And so in other words, any sin that a minister might commit, including having a dirty thought at the point of your baptism, would invalidate your baptism. That's Donatism. Orthodox sacramentology is more precise, that we're not saying that the sins of the priest have anything to do with whether or not your baptism is gracious per se. We're saying that certain things are necessary as presuppositions to have an Orthodox sacrament, and one of those things is the Orthodox faith. That's where we differ with the Augustinian position of ex opere operato, which says that even if you lose the faith, or even if you're an atheist or a Satanist, you can still perform certain rituals and rites such as baptism. Or the Roman Catholic position that if I get ordained and that day become a Satanist for the rest of my life, I can still confect the Eucharist and blaspheme it as a Satanist. We think that's absurd, and we are not Donatists because we're consistent in saying that that's an absurd position.
Okay, so then in that case then, so would you say that all out, like, let's just use Roman Catholic because that's an easy example, right? So would you say that all baptisms within the Roman Catholic Church are devoid of grace?
Yes.
Okay, so then wouldn't that mean then that there's vast amounts of converts within like the Russian Orthodox Church and certain dioceses of the OCA where you just have unbaptized converts because they're accepting converts in?
No, because I believe that when they're received into the church, whatever defects are lacking are made up for by their reception into the church. So I don't believe that God is a legalistic bean counter. It's the Roman Catholic view that actually believes it's the Augustinian position that makes God into this absurd legalist, because if you don't say the words correctly in the Roman Catholic position, it's all invalidated. That's the legalistic position, not our position.
Okay.
Have you seen the recent Arizona story about the priest who his entire diocese for the last 30 years are all invalid because he said the wrong words?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's a very famous, popular Roman Catholic story going around for the last few years in Arizona. Go look it up. That's legalism. The idea that God requires an atheist or a Muslim to baptize me, that's legalism. That's your position.
I'm not Catholic, and I'm more exploring this and trying to.
Okay, I thought you were Roman Catholic. My mistake.
No, I'm not Catholic. I'm discerning denominations right now. Like I'm more convinced of Anglicanism, but like I'm not fully decided on any one thing. But
Anglicanism?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah.
You want a good trans bishop? Is that what you want?
Well, I mean, obviously 80% of the Anglican community. Well, I'm not going to come on and like argue Anglicanism at the moment because I haven't even, like I said, I haven't even landed on one. And my friend Moore wanted me to come on and talk with you about the Donatism thing. Okay. But just to make sure that I understand what you're saying correctly, so essentially it doesn't really matter whether or not someone's baptized or not coming back into coming into the Orthodox Church.
No, they should be baptized. I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said that they should be baptized if there was a situation where It was totally out of accord. The ritual wasn't even done correctly. It's in the Orthodox Church. It's to be determined on a local basis by the local episcopate. Now, not every local episcopate in the Orthodox Church, unfortunately, does this in a proper, faithful way. Sometimes they're ecumenists, sometimes they're lazy. So, but the point is that it's not. Ironically, our position is not the one that's rigid and rigorous. Our position is the one that's actually flexible. It's the Roman Catholic legalist position of ex opere operato that's the real source of the problems here. Our position, I think, is perfectly reasonable. It's supposed to be left up to the bishop to determine. But a lot of times, what complicates this is that modern day post Novus Ordo Catholicism has gone so far from what's even remotely traditional. You've got Novus Ordo priests baptizing people in the name of the land, the sea, and the air. You've got Novus Ordo people baptizing people in the name of the Mother Earth, literally. So in those cases, and because it's getting so hard to determine whether there was any Trinitarian form at all, a lot of Orthodox churches are saying, and people are beginning to say, it might be wise to just baptize them all to make sure, because things are getting so crazy. I think that's a wise discipline. So you can't boil all this down into either ors. There's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of practical, pragmatic questions at play in this as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Like from an outside perspective, it does seem like this is something that would need to be settled, because there's a lot of inconsistency across the different metropolitans.
Well, you're not going to no, but that quote inconsistency is precisely what we call economia. And so we don't need you, an outsider, telling us what we need to do as the one universal standard. Who are you to tell us what's supposed to be our standard? You're not the judge of our inconsistency when we believe that there can be economia.
Okay, I mean, that's valid.
Do you think you're going to find that consistency in Anglicanism?
I mean, that depends. So, and like, even if I can't find that in Anglicanism, that doesn't necessarily take the focus off of the fact that it exists within Orthodoxy, right? So, like,
that what exists?
Really, like, the fact that that's an inconsistency, right? So,
I didn't say it was an inconsistency. I said it was differing approach. It's called economia. Do you even know what that is?
Yeah, like household, family, basically, right?
No, you don't know so you don't know what that is.
Or economy, sorry, yeah, economy, right.
Yeah, so in other words, as I said a minute ago, the local bishop is supposed to be able to determine when and where and how you apply the canons. This is a canonical canon law question as to how people are received. And different people are received in different ways because people's cases are different. So, for example, if a monophysite is baptized in the exact Orthodox way that we believe is the way that would be done, right? If that monophysite person renounces their heresy, many bishops can and have decided to receive them without rebaptizing or, quote, baptizing them. Because if the ritual is done correctly, then what's the impediment is the heresy. Once the heresy is removed, the baptism becomes efficacious when they join the church.
Okay. So then that areas where you have an entire, an entire church within Orthodoxy, I don't know what the exact correct term for that is, but, like you have the Russian
You're talking about
Orthodox,
jurisdictions.
Okay. When you have a specific jurisdiction that, with a broad brush says we recognize Roman Catholic holy orders, and so they don't practice, they don't baptize converts from Catholicism.
You're missing the point, though. Recognizing does not necessarily say that those things are gracious. It's saying that the ritual is done correctly, and when they join the Orthodox Church, the impediments to the grace are removed. By the way, did you know that's actually the Augustinian position? So even though we disagree about ex opere operato, nobody in the modern Roman Catholic or Protestant world or Anglican world actually follows the Augustinian position, which we are actually on this point closer to, which says that the impediment to the grace is the heresy. So even though Augustine believes that there's valid baptisms and even gracious baptisms outside the church, if you persist in the heresy, it doesn't get you anywhere. So we're actually closer to the Augustinian position on that point than anyone else is.
Yeah, and that much makes sense. So because I get,
so you're confusing different jurisdictions having decentralized different approaches to as if there's theological error and confusion everywhere.
Well, then maybe help me parse through this then, because the whole thing is that, so I get the fact that, the grace becomes efficacious or whatever the exact particular language you used was there, when they come in, and, it seems like the standard way of receiving heretics is confession, absolution, right? You accept them in, and
No, that's not true. So you don't know the canon law, the ancient canons. The canons of the Sixth Council, for example, give us different strictures and different approaches to different heretics depending upon their case. So this is why it's a canon law issue. It's very complex at times because of all the different sects. This wouldn't be complex if we didn't have 1,000 different crazy heresies doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And if we didn't have nuanced, complex issues in people's lives and in church history. So again, the Orthodox position is flexible on how to receive converts and heretics and schismatics from any different group. And if we take in a Roman Catholic and the bishops determine that they don't have to be whatever because the rituals were done correctly or whatever, that does not say or necessitate we're saying that they had the grace that whole time. It just simply means that the ritual is done correctly, it does not need to be redone, and the impediment to the grace is now removed.
Yeah, I get that, and I don't want to come across like I understand the position that it would be nuanced and you take it on a case-by-case basis. It's a tenable. Like I totally.
Do you know what canon law is?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
so Orthodox canon law is different from Roman Catholic canon law, and it's different from Anglican canon law. And so because it's nuanced and complex, and it goes back through all the 7 ecumenical councils and all the different canons that they have about the reception of heretics, there's a lot of confusion about different heretical groups. That's the source of confusion, is all these heretics. So that's why it's up to the local bishops to make those determinations. And because it's decentralized, it can lead to or give the impression that, oh, you guys don't have one consistent position on how to receive people. We got you. But in reality, the Roman Catholic position, because it thinks and prefers to have this single unitary position on this, actually leads to more stupid positions, like the idea that atheists and Muslims can baptize people.
Yeah, I guess I think my underlying point might be getting lost here then, or maybe.
Okay, go ahead. Explain. Then tell me what your underlying point is.
So, because I was saying, I get like the fact of dealing with it on case-by-case basis. You know, you evaluate each person like a Miaphysite or a Monophysitic that you call them. You accept them because, you know, as long as you can validate that the actual formula used and the underlying, you know, the consideration. But you still obviously have to accept them in, and at that point it becomes gracious. But that's a case-by-case basis. That's what you're saying right now. But you're saying actually case by case on each bishop, like an entire region.
That's what economia means.
Yeah, that just leads to then.
There's not a universal application of the canons in the Orthodox Church. Economia means that the bishops apply the canons to the situation.
But so that's just essentially that's saying that it's not a settled matter on this.
No, your assumption is that it's possible to have a settled matter on a complex matter that is precisely left up to a decentralized church in the Orthodox world. And the very question that you have is assuming the Roman Catholic tendency towards there being a universal position on this, which I'm saying is what led to all their stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So when this comes up in the Augustinian disputes, this eventually leads the Roman position to dogmatizing 3 things necessary for a sacrament. Do you know what those are?
No, not off the top of my head.
Matter, form, and intention. So that means that anytime matter, form, and intention are there, you have the genuine celebration of the sacrament and the grace. That's why it leads to the position that because baptism is necessary, if I don't have a Roman Catholic or even an Orthodox person around, if I want to become a Catholic, I can go to an atheist and I can get the atheist to baptize me. This is because of the seeking for a universal resolution to a complex issue that's economia.
But matter, form, and intention are either there or not there, right? So,
but you just now learned that. You don't even know how. That's itself leads to the stupidity of this position because how does an atheist? Do you know what intention means in that matter, form, and intention?
Yeah, like what? Did you actually have, you know, intending to properly perform the sacrament? Did you have the proper understanding of, you know, like a Mormon might say Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but they don't actually mean a true Trinitarian form. Is that what that's?
Well,
correct?
It's not even that because they realize that an atheist is not going to have the intention of true belief in the Trinity. And so what the Roman Catholic Church dogmatized was the intention to do what the church does, which is retarded. But so in other words, if an atheist, so now if I'm going to get baptized by an atheist, all I need the atheist to do is to baptize me in the form of the Trinity, for him to intend to do what the church does. And this is absurd.
And that's why I didn't include. I tried to include, a more digestible example than an atheist, obviously, because I don't think an atheist could give a proper baptism. But so let's make it.
The reason I brought that up was to say that the idea that you can have a universal answer to these types of church law questions is precisely what led to the definition of matter, form, and intention, and trying to give a scientific universal definition of when a sacrament is practiced. That's my point.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much time here, so I'll just try and get even more specific just for one last example and see if we can get anywhere with this. But I mean, obviously, we're going to end up with, you have your opinion, I have mine, and maybe I'll learn something that I didn't realize here.
I'm also going to demonstrate that what you're saying is false. I'm happy to do that too.
That's totally fine. I mean, if you can't, that's awesome. I mean, I care about the truth, obviously. So,
well, then why would you be attracted to Anglicanism? Let's get to that in a minute, but go ahead with what you're saying.
Okay, we can totally get to that. So let's get really microscopic here. Let's say an individual priest baptizes two people. One of those people goes and joins the Greek Orthodox Church. The other one joins the OCA. The OCA does not rebaptize him. I think they do case by case. They're not broad strokes as much. But and the Greek Orthodox, I think they rebaptize all Catholics, right? I could be wrong on that.
I already said that the grace of God makes up for whatever's lacking. Pretty much all Orthodox people are going to say that, even if you're a reader.
So then there is something that could be lacking in how converts are being received into the Orthodox Church.
I already said that you can have liberal ecumenist bishops who do not operate faithfully, but that's a different question from whether there's economia. So in other words, can economia be abused? Absolutely, of course.
Okay. So then, I mean, that's essentially that's what. I mean, this isn't like the biggest thing that would scandalize me from Orthodoxy, but I would say this is something that's scandalous from. I know you don't care too much what someone on the outside would say about that, but just from trying to be honest about that is something that does seem to scandalize some people on the outside. But I get there has to be nuance. I totally respect that. But what I'm saying is this is a singular priest baptizes these two people. One area they declare, yes, that, his, it was properly administered. So they accept this person in with chrismation and, it becomes gracious at that point. The other person is rebaptized, is either the baptism was valid or it wasn't, right? Or not valid. You don't want to use valid. Either it was correctly given.
No, I don't have a problem with valid. Right? It's just that valid is ambiguous because sometimes people think that necessitates that it also possesses the grace.
Okay, so it was either valid or it wasn't, and in one case it's taken to be valid, and the other it isn't. So obviously, God is going to have grace with. An individual priest or bishop is going to, we can't have perfect knowledge of whether or not someone received the sacrament properly. My concern is when you have an entire jurisdiction with a sweeping, yes, they're valid, or no, they're not valid. And then there's also ones, the nuanced position seems the most tenable. And it just, from the outside, it seems like that is a pretty important thing to be able to settle is how you receive converts, even if that's a case-by-case basis.
Well, I mean, if you know the history of the church, you'll know that the church, in many controversies or in disputed issues, many different jurisdictions will take different sides and different positions and institute different policies. So what? How does that?
But then if it's a big enough issue, then an ecumenical council is gathered so that it can be settled.
If it's a big enough issue, yeah. But I mean, we've had the flexibility about the reception of converts for a long time. Yeah,
to me, that just seems like that's a pretty important thing to have figured out. But I understand we're probably not going to be able to take this point much
Why do
further.
you? Who are we? Why are we supposed to think that you are the one that determines what the most important thing for the Orthodox Church to figure out? You haven't even figured out which church you believe in yet, but you're going to come tell us what the most important things that we have to have solidified is. It's just arrogance.
I'm not telling you.
You just did. What do you mean? That's what you just argued.
I'm saying this is the perception that it comes across to me as. It seems like it would be important. I understand. I don't have holy orders. I'm not someone of authority to be able to call a council. So yeah, like I could just shut up and never talk about these things. But I'm going to.
Well, but I mean, when you get into church history, you're going to realize that it doesn't matter which of the communions you choose. Like each of these communions has difficult, challenging periods all throughout church history, and even in whichever church communion you choose to join. Do you think that Anglicanism is going to be immune from the kinds of questions that you're raising about orthodoxy? Like these are pretty universal types of issues and questions, and so the idea that I'm going to make my decisions based on the ones that I arbitrarily decide ought to have the universal answer to certain questions, to me seems like an absurd picking and choosing about how you're going to pick the real church.
I mean, not at all. Obviously, it's not. I don't think I'm going to find that anywhere. That's why I think Anglicanism, in that sense, with branch theory, it recognizes the messiness of church history and the fact that it is difficult to simply pin.
How does it? No, that wouldn't prove branch theory. I mean, that would just prove that there's canonical issues in every church. But why a canonical issue is not a dogmatic issue? Yeah,
because it hasn't been turned into dogma yet. So
well, no, I would say that maybe, but like the dogmas of the church in their creedal sense have already been solidified, and that's why it's easy to demonstrate that the Anglican Church does not teach what was solidified in the first 7 centuries.
I mean, obviously, I would disagree with. Well, I mean, depends on if you're talking.
How many churches are there? There's one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and you're saying that no, it's actually they're split into a bunch of branches.
I mean, yeah, I would say from what it seems like from history is that the Great Schism is a very difficult. It's not like where you have the Nestorians break off and over time it becomes very clear which one is which.
Well, the problem with this is that when you go to Ephesus and you read the way that Ephesus speaks of the Nestorians, how do they interpret the church and the people that are no longer in it?
I mean, I imagine they said something along the lines of that they're no longer within the church.
Exactly. So that refutes the branch theory right there.
Well, the problem is that what I was saying is that with the Nestorians, it becomes very clear which is the real church, right? It becomes very clear after enough centuries of time, but we're 1,000 years past the Great Schism. It's still incredibly difficult for people to recognize both of these massive institutions, which one is the correct one.
I don't think it's very. I mean, well, that's a subjective. Well, maybe you think it's difficult. I think a lot of people do find it pretty simple to. I mean, do you mean between you say great institutions about Rome?
I'm saying big institutions. Yes, they're both very big.
But you're saying that it's neither Rome or Orthodoxy; it's Anglicanism. And I don't understand. I don't understand your answer. Huh?
Anglicanism doesn't say that Rome and Orthodoxy are invalid churches. That's the whole thing of branch theory. That is, they are all.
It's a ridiculous position because it assumes that none of the positions are actually the Orthodox Church. There is no Orthodox church.
That's a subjective opinion.
Now it's so every position is so every opinion is a subjective opinion now. So now you're a relativist.
No, that's not at all. That's completely straw man.
How is that? You just said it's suddenly a subjective opinion. How did you get to that?
Well, because you're saying,
you just admitted that Ephesus teaches that there's one visible church and that the Nestorians are out of it. Yeah, so you're saying, shut up. You said that that's how Ephesus understood itself in the church, right?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, okay. So you do not believe in the ecclesiology of Ephesus.
No, I agree. At the time, there was
so at the time, when it evolves, was branch theory true at that time?
I mean, yeah, because it was in the trunk form.
Wait a minute. Branch theory was true when Ephesus was not operating on the basis of branch theory.
I mean, I wouldn't expect anyone to think that there was branches when there was no branch yet.
When did the branches happen?
I would say the easiest to point to would be the Great Schism, and that's.
This
and I
is
understand.
how is that not arbitrary and subjective? So everybody, and let me ask you this: did anybody understand any branch theory at that time? So you believe in the evolution of doctrine?
Evolution.
So nobody had a coherent ecclesiology until the schism?
No, I think that it was. I mean, that's like saying nobody had a clear.
That's what you just argued, Goofus. You just said that they didn't know yet about branch theory, and they didn't think there was a branch theory. But by the time of the schism, now branch theory becomes true.
Well, it's the same as plenty of people did not know about.
No, so you're saying they didn't understand ecclesiology and was defective until there was a schism. That's a stupid position.
As much as the fathers prior to Nicaea didn't know about the Trinity, there was still
the fathers of Nicaea didn't know about the Trinity. What are you talking about?
The fathers before, I said. So
they did know the Trinity. So what are you talking about?
They did, but there's a confusion around certain terms, like where you see being and person are not used fully consistently by the fathers.
No, that's a false analogy
Nicaea.
Because they're still Trinitarian. The people at Ephesus are still conceiving of a visible single institution as the church. And you're saying that that was a perfectly correct ecclesiology until there was a great schism. And now it's no longer the case that there's a single visible institution. That's evolution of doctrine. That's why you're a heretic.
Because no, it's not evolution. It's simply what existed at the time.
No, it's an evolution of doctrinal truth on ecclesiology. You're saying that it wasn't the case that branch theory was true for the first 1,000 years. Then in 1054, suddenly because of a heresy, branch theory becomes true. That's what you're saying.
No, I would say that, like I said, it's true regardless. It was a trunk at the time.
But the church didn't. So Christ didn't give to the church the mind of the church to accurately understand for the first 1,000 years that there's one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, and it doesn't mean branch theory.
There was one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church at the time.
So you're a sophist now because you're saying that by the time of the schism, there's no longer one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church.
I would say there is, but they're no longer.
But now you've redefined it to be not the ecclesiology that they had for the first 1,000 years. So you believe in evolution of doctrine.
It's simply the church came into schism. They were no longer in communion with each other.
So now they have a new understanding of ecclesiology called branch theory. Which, by the way, did anyone at that time teach branch theory?
I mean, I'm not.
Did anyone at that time teach branch theory?
Probably not.
Okay, so that's bullshit again at another level.
You can view it that way.
No, it is that way. You just admitted that no one taught this way, but you retroactively, because of Anglican theologians in the 1700s, can look back and posit in a revisionist way that they suddenly became branch theory proponents when you just admitted that they didn't actually believe that at the time.
So once churches are no longer in communion with each other,
guess what? The theology of the first 1,000 years of the church is still the same theology, which you've already admitted. That's the point.
Sure. So
I'm out. I'm done. I can't do any more of it.